When you want to build a WordPress website, there are some things that you're going to need. One is a domain name, and that's kind of like a virtual street address for how people will find your website easily. The next thing you're going to need is web hosting. So you can think of it kind of like a parcel of land, but in this case virtual land and virtual utilities that you build your website on. Okay, the next thing you're going to need is some security, which comes in the form of an SSL certificate, and in most cases, a free version of that SSL certificate is usually sufficient. It helps secure your website from intruders and hackers and those types of things. And then the last thing you're going to need is WordPress. So most website hosting companies will have WordPress as like a one-click install. They may pre-install it for you, or they will usually have some sort of tool, something like Soft Oculus, that'll make it so you can quickly install it. And what WordPress is like the materials, tools, and methods that you use to actually build the website. Now, I do have a note on here. If you buy the domain name and the web hosting separately, which can save you money, you will need to change the DNS settings for the domain name. It may sound complicated, but it's not all that hard. I'll show you more on that in another video. Alright, so with these things out of the way, I'm going to kind of go into a bit more detail about what each of these is, what it does, how it works, and those kinds of things, so you can better understand the purpose of it. Alright, so what is a domain name? Well, as I said before, it's like a digital street address. It's going to be typically something like google.com or yahoo.com or one of the countless other ones. It will usually end in .com, but there are a whole lot of other variations. So .com was the default one when the internet came out, and then they've added like .net and .info and .org and .biz, and now there's just so many, I can't even name them. There's just like .ai and .life and .store and just a whole variety. Okay, so a domain name works by making it easy for someone to get to your website by simply typing in, the name of your business or the phrase or whatever it is that you choose for your domain name, and then putting that into the URL bar of a web browser. It might be on a web browser on their phone, it might be a web browser on their computer, or whatever device they're doing. They enter that in, press enter, and then it will load up your website. So that's basically how it works. Now you can get a domain name from a wide variety of companies. They're typically, listed for sale, under $20 most of the time, but some of the special domain names may cost more. It just kind of can vary, and it depends on the domain name registrar. And when you buy a domain name, you're actually kind of renting it rather than actually buying it. So when you are buying a domain name, it's only for like a 1-year term, unless you choose to buy it for longer than that. You can buy additional years, and they will bill you whatever price that they have at the time. The prices do go up from time to time. They have increased from what they used to be originally, and the sale price that you get it when you first buy it may be different from when it renews, so that's something to pay attention to. Alright, so the next thing to know is that you will want to have privacy protection. Privacy protection is what keeps your contact details out of a public directory. So every time a domain name is registered, the name and address and phone number and email address for that person is listed into a directory called the Whois directory. And this directory has the names of all the domain names in the whole world. And that is a public directory. But there's a way to keep your personal information or your registration details out of that directory so that you don't get spammed. You'll receive a lot of spam and scam emails, calls, mail, whatever, if you have your information listed publicly in that directory, just because it is a massive database that scammers and spammers like to take advantage of. And so you definitely need privacy protection. a lot of companies will charge extra for that. It might cost $10, it might be $7, it might be $20. It just varies by the company, but usually it's less than 20. But you can find domain name registrars that will offer that for free when you register the domain name, so you don't have to pay an additional fee. I usually choose those types of companies, but that's entirely up to you. I like to save money. So I do have some companies I recommend, and they offer free privacy protection, and so I will have the links to those available in the description of this video, and as well as on the website. Okay, so next thing we need to talk about is web hosting. So what really is web hosting? It is like your digital property that you're going to be building your website on. So if you think of it in terms of like a piece of real estate, you have, you know, your actual land. In this case, with web hosting, that's like your storage space on a computer. It's a special computer, not just any computer, and it's something that runs 24/7 and makes it available online. So when someone types in your domain name and they go to your website, they're going to that web hosting. So they're opening the files on that web hosting server that you end up setting up for your website with whatever company you choose. And they make it so that people can access your website 24/7 regardless of where they are, unless you set it up a little bit differently and restrict, you know, areas and countries and all kinds of things. I won't go into those details, but generally speaking, websites are usually accessible no matter where you are in the world, no matter what day and time. These computers run 24/7 so that your website will be accessible all the time. Okay, so where can you get it? There are a wide variety of companies all vying for your money. And I do have some companies that I recommend, like HawkHost. I've used them for years. They're a really great host. They are a little bit less user-friendly than other options, but they have been really reliable and one of the most affordable companies I have ever found. And a lot of companies will also include tools to build your website, and HawkHost is one of them, but it's just one of many. There are a wide variety of web hosting companies that you can go through, and you can use even website builders that include web hosting with their service. And in terms of what kind of web hosting you need, typically for most small business websites, you're going to be looking for shared hosting plans, and those are usually the least expensive. You can kind of think of a shared hosting plan as being like living in an apartment building where you have an apartment and there's a whole bunch of other apartments, you know, and you have neighbors, but you generally have this isolated space where you have some privacy and stuff, but it's not totally isolated compared to, say, having your own building somewhere. Okay, so that's kind of what shared hosting is, to try and put it into simple terms so that it'd be easy to understand, I hope. And so with shared hosting, there are, you know, shared resources. So just like in an apartment building, you may have noisy neighbors or neighbors that are disruptive, and those can interfere with your website. But generally speaking, it's not going to be an issue. However, it can, you know, from time to time there might be a slowdown on your site because someone else is getting a lot of traffic on theirs or something like that. But generally it's not going to be that big of an issue, but it will depend on the company that you go through, and yeah, it's hard to predict and know for sure what, you know, you can expect, but for the most part you can expect that it's not going to be an issue. Now if your website is going to have a lot of traffic, then you would want to upgrade to a different type of hosting, but when you're starting out or with a small business website, shared hosting is usually fine. I'm not going to cover the other kinds of hosting in this, but you can always put, you know, a question or something in the comments, and I will try to answer that, and I may cover the web hosting types in another video if that's something you'd want to see. Okay, so the next thing I need to talk about is email hosting. Uh, you can think of email hosting as kind of like being your mailbox. It's a place where you can send and receive mail, and in this case, digital mail. I mean, so emails, and it uses your domain name instead of, say, a free service like Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail. Um, so it's just going to be like whatever you specify with the little @ symbol and then your domain name. That's what an email hosting usually does. And do you need email hosting? Well, it's better for your business if you want to make a professional presentation. It's there are a lot of reasons why you'll want to do this, and a lot of it has to do with being professional and also your security, because if you don't use it, it's going to be easy for scammers to be able to come up with some, email address that is similar to yours and then pose as your business and contact your customers and those kinds of things, or contact people claiming to be your business. Scammers do this all the time. They post like job postings and stuff like that. They do all kinds of crazy stuff. And so if you get email hosting, you can help prevent that from happening. It also makes it easier for people to be able to contact you, and so that, when they want to try and figure out, who to send emails to, they'll be able to assume that it'll be to a domain name email address, and it just looks better. And it also can help you keep more organized, because chances are you're going to get less spam, generally speaking, to a business email than to an email that you use for everything when you sign up for stuff like Gmail or Yahoo or something. You probably use it for a lot of things, and you probably have a lot of spam, and so it's easier to miss emails, especially important ones, when you use an inbox like that. Whereas if you use a professional email account with email hosting, you're going to have a better time with it. Okay, so where can you get email hosting? Well, a lot of shared hosting plans actually include it for free. So you can create, multiple email addresses, usually, with most plans. It's going to depend on the hosting company you choose. But some offer unlimited, some offer a set number. But generally speaking, you can do just fine with your email hosting being hosted on the same computer as your website. Okay, if you use a website builder such as Unicorn Platform, then you're going to need separate email hosting. And it just kind of depends on the service you're using and what they allow. Some of them, may allow you to have an email, but they may restrict your usage of it. Or they may restrict it so you can't have multiple email accounts or something like that. There may be some other limitations to that, so you may need to purchase it separately. It can be really affordable though. It just kind of depends on what plan you get. And it's going to, basically come down to your needs and budget and what company you decide to go through. I'm sure you've heard of Google Workspace and the Microsoft email. Those typically have a lot of features that most people don't use all the time. Perhaps it's something that you're used to and accustomed to, and by all means, if you want to use that, that's fine. I typically like to save money, so I will use a service that doesn't have all the fancy features, and I just want an inbox that works is my main concern. And so when you're looking for cost-cutting, things, that is something that you can do with email hosting. So you don't have to pay a lot for it. Okay, so the next thing is going to be an IP address. This is a term that you need to know. It's not necessarily something that you have to buy or get or do or anything like that. What it is an IP. You can think of it like a latitude, longitude coordinates on the globe. If you have if you type in latitude, longitude coordinates on Google Maps and stuff, it will take you to a particular location. Okay. Well, an IP address kind of ties a number to a particular device accessing the internet. It's an overly complex term to try and explain to someone without technical understanding, so I'm trying to use things from the real world that will be relatable to you. So that's why I would say kind of think of it like in a Google Maps situation, where if you're trying to get to a business, and you usually type in an address, well, behind that address is actual specific coordinates, and an IP address is kind of like that. And so it's the specific address where your virtual property is located. Okay, so how does this work? So behind the scenes, it's going to be operating and helping to connect your domain name to where your website is actually located. If in the case of your website being hosted and your domain name being hosted by the same company, then that's going to be pretty close together, and it may do it automatically for you. Whereas if you have them separate, there may be a couple of extra steps where you may need to enter in an IP address, or you may need to change some other things, especially if you use separate email hosting. Then it has a little bit more complicated setup, where an IP address would be involved. But generally speaking, it's not something you're going to have to too much worry about, but it may be something that you will encounter as you go to build your website, is you'll probably see something that mentions an IP address. And so that's kind of what it is. So it's just something that you may end up having to enter into the settings somewhere for one of the services that you use. Okay, so the next thing is going to be DNS and name servers. So it's another technical thing, but to try and put it simply, you can kind of think of it like the GPS of the internet. So it's going to guide your customers to where your website is, and it runs behind the scenes just directing internet traffic. Okay, so without DNS, people would not be able to get to anything. It's kind of like the roads in a way that kind of take traffic to and from. So without those instructions, people are not going to be able to find your website. So it's it all happens behind the scenes, but the terms are important, because when you have your domain name and your hosting separate, then you'll need to know what that is. So you'll need to enter in some details into the DNS of the domain name. So it's connected to the domain name, and you can kind of think of it like the contact list in a phone, where numbers are associated to names. So if you select a name in your contact list, it's going to have numbers associated with it, telling it where to go, where that call should go. So it's a similar kind of scenario. So when you buy a domain name, you'll typically have an option to manage that domain name, and it will have some technical settings. Those technical settings are usually called DNS. It will say DNS settings. It might be called different things, but it'll usually be, mention DNS somewhere. And you'll also see something called name servers. Name servers are very similar. They're basically just settings inside the domain name that you will use to help connect that domain name to where it needs to go. So where it needs to go is your web hosting. So wherever you choose to web host, use as a web host or whatever for your website, you have to be able to connect the two. And the way you connect those is by setting the DNS name server settings. So typically when you get a web hosting plan, you'll be given some name servers. And those name servers will usually be like ns1 something something.com. It'll have some sort of domain name for the hosting company, and it'll usually start with NS for name server, and then it'll have a number, usually 1 through 4. They'll usually give you 2 to 4 of them, and you take that information and then you go to wherever your domain name is located, and you put in, you just copy and paste those values into the little boxes for the name servers in your DNS settings for the domain name. I will try to keep it as simple as I can, and I will have some sort of demonstration in another video. But if you choose a company to get both the domain name and the web hosting through, they'll usually do that automatically, but not always. It just depends on the company and their setup for things. So if you have to enter it in, it's not that difficult. Usually entering name servers is far easier than trying to mess with the actual specific DNS settings. And I'll try and have an example to be able to show you what those are and what they look like and those kinds of things a bit later. All right, so SSL certificates. So like I said, it is like a padlock to help keep out thieves and bad actors and intruders and stuff from your digital property. Do you need one? And, you know, I would say absolutely yes, but you don't need to buy it. You can usually get it for free. Most website hosts will offer it for free. It's usually called something called Let's Encrypt. That's just the name of the free version. It's open source, meaning it's available, so web hosts will usually offer it because it doesn't cost them anything, and so they just include it as another value to provide for you at no additional charge. And for the most part, it's going to be sufficient for most small business websites. So if you think that you're going to be handling a lot of personal information, such as like social security numbers for some reason, or driver's license numbers, or more private details than simply a name and address, then you may want to invest in a proper paid SSL certificate, but the setup can be a little bit complicated, and it just kind of depends on the companies you choose to go through and where you buy it and the setup involved with it. But generally speaking, you can usually get a free SSL certificate, and it'll be usually set up pretty easily and quickly, and in some cases automatically installed for you and ready to go, so you can start building your site. Okay, website builders. There are a variety of different website builders, but all of them have something in common. They're kind of like the materials, tools, and methods that you use to build a house. So, but instead of a house or a building, you're building a website. And so it's just kind of the pieces that you use to construct it. It puts together a kind of framework that makes it easy for you to style, customize, insert your content and those kinds of things, so you can make it pretty and you don't have to worry about all the technical stuff that goes on in the background. So it's kind of like having a construction company put together a house for you, and you don't have to actually, you know, cut the wood and put the frame together and all those kinds of things. It takes out the hard work for you and makes it much more simpler, so that you can focus more on putting together the design and the content and those kinds of things. Now, there are a variety of website builders. As I mentioned in other videos and stuff, there's Wix, there's Squarespace, there's a whole bunch of different ones. You can use Unicorn Platform, which is an AI-generated website one. There's a ZipWP and other ones. The solution you choose, it's going to depend on a number of things, but primarily it's going to depend on what you need and your budget. So each one is going to have some kind of limitations. It's going to have some features that it comes with and a lot of features that it doesn't. It's going to have different costs, you know, involved. Some may be one time, others may be a monthly subscription. Some, you know, may have a core system that's free, like WordPress, while others may have, you know, specialized software that they will only sell, and so you'd have to have a paid plan to be able to access those. As mentioned before, the most popular one is WordPress, but there are many others, and now there's a lot of AI-powered website builders that are taking over, that will be that are far more powerful, and you know, that can do things much more quickly and easily for you. So that's what I mean by powerful. All right, so tying all of this together. Okay, so I've got some little pictures here to kind of help explain this, but you can, again, think of a domain name kind of like the street address, so where people are going to find your business, it's going to direct them to that location. The web hosting is like the plot of land, and then the website builder, it's, you know, like the construction company putting your website together, and then the email hosting is like a mailbox for your business where you can send and receive emails. The DNS and the name servers, kind of like the streets, the navigation, the GPS, phone book kind of thing, where people will get from point A to point B. So if they want to, you know, they type in, you know, the domain name, it's going to take them to the destination. So when you type google.com, it's using DNS to direct your your request for google.com to where google.com is actually located on the special computers that run it 24/7. Okay, so they're hosting. Okay, the SSL certificate, again, is like the padlock. It's securing the domain name, web hosting, and your website builder. It's securing those services and stuff from intruders and stuff. Okay, so that's kind of a general, simplified explanation for what these things do and what they are.